Hello everyone. Up till now we have studied different types of shaft. Axle we have studied. Again in last video we have learned about different belt drive, open belt drive, cross belt drive. Then chain drive also we have studied. Now in this video we are going to learn about gear drive. Now I request all of you go through the notes which are shared on your WhatsApp group. And if you have any doubt, then you can ask. Whatever part is not covered in the video, there may be a 10 to 15% parts that may be there in your notes. So go through your notes. So in this video we are going to learn about the gear drive. So gear is generally used for transmission of large power than your belt drive and chain drive. When two gears are engaged to each other, gears having the teeth on its circumference, when two gears are engaged to each other, the teeth will get engaged and power is transmitted from one gear to another gear. So when gears are engaged, there may not be any slip of gear from each other, so that it is called as a positive drive because there is no slip. Now there are different classification of gears are available according to their axis. Means when two gears are engaged to each other, what is the position of axis of both gears? Accordingly the classification is created. So first classification is gears for parallel axis. When two gears are engaged to each other, then axis of both gears is parallel to each other, then that gear is called as parallel axis gear. Then three types are there: spur gear, helical gear, and rack and pinion. Second classification is there accordingly gear for intersecting axis. When two gears are meshes or engages to each other, axis of both gears is going to intersect, then that gear is called as intersecting axis gear, which is bevel gear. And third type of gear is gear for non-parallel and non-intersecting axis, which is worm and worm wheel gear or worm gears. So one by one we'll study. So first is spur gear. Now you can see here this animation. One gear is engaged to another gear. Here also one gear is engaged to another gear. Again, all this classification you can easily see. So what is spur gear? So when gears teeth, these are the teeth of gear. Okay, you can see here on circumference teeth are there. Teeth are going to engages to the another gear. Then when one gear rotates, another gear will also rotate. When the teeth are parallel to axis of gear, when teeth are cut parallel to axis of gear, then that gear is called as spur gear. Axis of gear and gear teeth is parallel to each other, then it is called as spur gear. Now generally it is used for low power transmission. Spur gears are used for low power transmission. Example you can see in your watch. It is used to transmit the motion of your all the needles of watch can take place due to this spur gear. Now basically here two gears are there. If you see here, one gear diameter is less than other gear. Here also one gear diameter is less than other gear. Okay, so here power is transmitted from one gear to another gear. So smaller gear diameter is smaller gear, the diameter which is less, that gear is called as pinion. Here it is, you can see the gear which is having less diameter, it is called as pinion. And the wheel or the gear which is having more diameter, that wheel is called as gear. Smaller diameter wheel is called as pinion, bigger wheel is called as gear. So power is always transmitted from pinion to gear. In spur gear, power is always transmitted from pinion to gear. Here you can see the front view of your when two gears are meshes. This is side view is shown. This is pinion, this is a gear. Power is transmitted from pinion to the gear. And C is the center distance between two gears. Axis of both gears are parallel to each other. Second is helical gear. Now you can easily see here, if you compare helical gear with the spur gear, in spur gear teeth are cut straight or it is parallel to the axis. Now you can see here teeth are cut inclined to the axis of gear. So when teeth are cut at some inclination to the axis of gear, then that gear is called as helical gear, and that angle is called as helix angle. That angle is called as helix angle. Now generally this helical gear is used for more power transmission than the spur gear. Now whenever two gears are engaged to each other in helical gear, power transmission is always smooth than the spur gear. There is a smoother or noiseless power transmission, and heavy power is transmitted from one gear to another gear in case of helical gear than spur gear. In case of example, in case of washing machine or a high speed stage gearbox, the helical gears are used. Here you can see this front view and side view. When a question is asked in examination, you can draw this diagram. Now next is rack and pinion. Okay, just one point is left. Now you can see here, when one gear rotates, another gear will also rotate, which is engaged to each other. So function of spur gear and helical gear, in case of both gears, a rotary motion, input motion is rotary, output motion is also rotary. So rotary motion is converted into rotary motion. That is the function of spur and helical gear. You can see rotary motion is converted into rotary. Input motion is also rotary, output motion is also rotary. But if you see rack and pinion, what is the function of rack and pinion? Now this red color gear is called as the pinion, and bottom is the rack. Here green color, it is the pinion, bottom is the rack. Now you can see pinion is rotating and rack is moving linearly. So function of rack and pinion gear is to convert rotary motion into linear motion or reciprocating motion or vice versa. Function of rack and pinion is conversion of rotary to linear motion. Now generally it is used in your steering mechanism. When you are rotating the steering, that is the input motion, and then with the help of universal joint, the rack will rotate. Rack will move linearly. So example, in steering system of automobile, the rack and pinion is used. Then bevel gear. Now rack and pinion is bevel gear. When axis of two gears are intersect to each other, see, you can see here, if you draw the axis of this gear, okay, this is axis of this gear and this axis of this gear, so it will intersect to each other. When axis of both gears are intersect to each other, then it is called as intersecting axis gear, or example is bevel gear. So you can see when you want to transmit your motion at 90 degree, okay, this gear is rotating and this gear will also rotate, so power is transmitted from this gear to this gear. So at right angle the motion will be going to transmit. So it is generally used in your differential gearbox when you want to transmit the power at 90 degree or right angle, then the bevel gears are used. So assembly of two bevel gear it is shown. Then worm and worm wheel gear. So here you can observe this is axis of this gear and this is axis of this gear. So both axes will not going to intersect because this axis is is above and axis of this gear is below, so they are not going to intersect to each other. So it is non intersecting axis gears, non parallel or non intersecting axis gear. It is called as worm and worm wheel gear. So it is a worm and worm wheel gear is an assembly of screw which is known as worm and worm and gear wheel. So transmit motion between two shafts whose axes are not crossing to each other. Axis of both gears are not going to cross to each other. Generally it is used for high torque transmission. Now you can see this gear is rotating and this gear is moving linearly. It is also rotating, also it is going to move linearly. So you have observed the screw. When you rotate the screw, it is rotating also and it is moving linearly also. So function of worm and worm wheel gear is to transmit the rotary motion into rotary motion as well as linear motion. So you are observing the door shutter, okay, shop shutters. So when that shopkeeper is rotating the knob of that shutter, the shutter will go upward as well as it is rotating. So worm and worm wheel gear is generally used in the shop shutters, or it is always or it can be used in the elevator, lifts, conveyor belt or cranes. This is the side view. You can draw this diagram, or this is also used in the toys. Now next is spur gear train. What is meant by spur gear train? Now you can observe here two gears are meshes or engages to each other. A gear is engages to B gear. One is called as driver, another is called as driven. So when two gears are engages to each other, both gears will always rotate in opposite direction. Both gears will rotate in opposite direction. As two gears are there, so combination of these two gears, or it is called as gear pair. Now here you can see, now here three gears are there. So one gear rotating in clockwise direction, another gear will rotate in anti-clockwise direction, and C gear will rotate in clockwise direction. So when there are more than two gears in combination, then it is called as a gear train. Only two gears are there, so it is called as gear pair. More than two gears are there, if four gears are there, five gears are there which are connected to each other or meshes to each other, then it is called as gear train. So there should be a more than two gear. Now next is the compound gear. What is meant by compound gear? Now here you can see on one shaft only one gear is mounted. Here also on one shaft only one gear is mounted. Here also only one gear is there on one shaft. But here you can see two gears are mounted on single shaft. Two gears are mounted on single shaft. So that this type of gear is called as a compound gear. Next is the rope drive. So this part we'll learn in the next video.